Okay, so what are we going to cover today? We're talking specifically about the basic CIOC WordPress plugin that uses what we call our basic data feeds, meaning that it's a very limited selection of search and search result tools that you can use to embed into your WordPress site. The feed could actually be used by other sites. It's a regular API. It doesn't have to be used by WordPress, but it was designed for the purpose of embedding in a WordPress site. There are limitations to this API, hence calling it the basic feed. There are a limited number of records returned by all of the different kinds of feeds, and that number varies. It is negotiable, so if you feel that the number of records being returned is not reasonable for your requirement, I'm absolutely willing to hear your case for why we might want to change it or have an option to be able to adjust that number. But the idea here is that this is supposed to produce small lists of records or categories, and that the links that are created will actually bring the person back to your main CIOC site. So this is not intended to be a full-on run your entire database in your WordPress plugin, although we do anticipate in the near future looking into doing a WordPress plugin that uses the full remote search and details API. This is not it, but it will give you hopefully lots of ideas about how this could be useful in your site or in other sites in the community. So obviously the best place to start here is to make sure you know how to get access to resources. So there are user manuals available for the two plugins that we have right now, the Community Information Feed and the Volunteer Opportunities Feed. You can find that documentation at opencioc.org. So if you go to the home page, you'll see a section that says WordPress Plugins, View Details, and you'll have access to the two user manuals. It should document everything that's necessary in order to use this effectively, and I will update it as there are new features or changes made to the plugin, so that's available to you as well as this video for a reference. I'm going to be using that reference to guide the session today, and I'm also going to give you a tour of the beta version of our Shortcode Generator tool, which I'll explain later, that is a nice little handhold through this process to make it easier to get the search results that you want. So probably a good place to start is to give you a sense of what this actually does. So the first site that ever used this and was one of the initial groups that helped us decide to build this tool is volunteerconnection.ca and Community Connection, the organization. And this is an example of a site where they're using 3 of our volunteer data feeds to present information live out of the database in their website. So in this case, the 3 feeds they're using are a little list of the newest opportunities in this region, the most popular areas of interest in that region, and a list of the organizations with either new or popular opportunities. So this is all live, and as the data changes in the database, every time you load this page, it's pulling always the most recent data live out of the database. It's not being stored in the site. It's directly accessing the data out of the CIOC database. These feeds are driven based on a special key that gets given to whoever wants to put this information in their site that we call an API key. And I'm going to show you now how to get one of these keys out of your database. Can I have a volunteer site who would like to allow me to demonstrate? Okay, I've got Nova Scotia. Thank you very much. I'll probably ask for a volunteer one later as well. So we'll start with this one. Okay. So in the setup area of the database, there is a section called API. I'm going to zoom in a little here so you can see better. Called API Sharing and Export. And in this section, you'll see a menu item called Basic Data Feed API Keys. So there's currently 2 keys in here. I'm going to think test key was actually made by me, so I'm going to go in and edit this one. I'll call it ACL test key and hope this is me. And update it, already ready to go. If you want to create a new key, you just click the add button and create a new one. Make sure you give it a name that makes you know what it's for. API keys should generally be one for every site or purpose that you need it for. So you can reuse the same key in multiple sites, but it's not really a good idea to give the same key to multiple different organizations, because if one of them was using it in an inappropriate way, or you wanted to stop their use of the key and you inactivated it and you had given it out to other people, you would have no way to prevent chaos because it would inactivate for everybody. So by giving each organization that needs access their own key, then you have control if you need to turn it off or change the settings and things like that. If you're using the volunteer software, you'll have the option to check off the volunteer software as well or instead. If you don't check off either community information or volunteer, that key does not work. It's the same as making it inactive, because there's nothing that you can query if you haven't activated the key for at least one module in the database. So this up here, the feed API key, this is the important piece of information. So if you were working with a third party, a partner, this is the most important piece of information that you're going to provide to them. That's like a handshake between their site and your CIOC site to say they're allowed to go and query your database. The basic feeds do not allow access to any data that is not already publicly available. They rely on you having a public CIOC site. As I said, they're not a substitute for your CIOC site. They don't allow you to do a full record details, full searching capability. This is intended to supplement an existing CIOC site so that you can draw some content in and then lead people back into the database for more information. So it relies on there being an active public site available to work, and you can only use public views and only access public records and public content. And that's part of why we don't worry too much about associating it with a login or any other thing other than the tag, because in the end, there's nothing that can be fetched with this key other than a small quantity of publicly available information. So once you have your key, you can actually, that's all you need to get started. I'm going to show you installation a little later, but I want to just give you a little demonstration of how this actually works. So I'm going to cheat and use this little Shortcode Generator tool. I'm going to pick the key, and I start to get access to certain settings. This is a beta tool, meaning it's not ready for prime time. There will be more features added to this tool, but it is a very handy helper for helping you build the query that you want to show up in your WordPress site. This tool will be publicly available, so that if you want to start giving keys to organizations in your community to allow them to post lists of records or volunteer opportunities on their own site, that they will have access to this tool as well, so that they can easily copy and paste from here into their WordPress site to get the results that they want. So the first thing we have to pick is our key, which I did, and then the types of listings that I have available will depend on whether I have community information or volunteer. So in this case, I only have access to community information. So I'm going to start with the default, which is some newest records. I then have to pick a domain name and or view. So most databases have more than one domain name and more than one view that's publicly available. So this allows you to choose the one that you want to work with. I'm going to pick province-wide. From then I have the ability to pick specific fields that I want to show up. I'm going to show the description, the email, and the website. There are a bunch of other kind of cutesy things that you can do to make it look nicer, adding icons and different styles, but we'll leave it at this. So now at the bottom, I have this generated shortcode. This is the thing that makes it all work. So when you have the plugin installed, this is what you're going to enter on your blog posts, on your pages, anywhere in your WordPress site that you want this content to show. You're going to copy one of these things called a shortcode onto that page in the place where you want it to show up. So I have just a local testing WordPress site that already has the plugin installed. I'm going to go into a post, or I'll even create a new post here. Brand new post. I'm going to call it January 22nd, 2016. I'm going to say some records from, and then I'm going to post in my shortcode. So I'm going to copy and paste this into my post. I'm going to publish it because this is not going to be seen by anyone, so I don't care if it's bad. And now I'm going to have a look at it. And there we go. It's that easy. So that is the very basics of how this works. So you would adjust the things that you want to show according to the kinds of lists of records that you want, the kinds of fields that you want to show up, the view that you want to use. You can switch languages if you have more than one language of record in your database. And it's all done through those little shortcodes that I just generated. Let's try changing this a little bit. Instead of doing province-wide, I'm going to pick a different one. I'm going to pick Nova Scotia Trails. I'm going to not include the email, but I am going to include the site address and the office phone. I'm going to take off the automatic styling and the icons so we can see what it looks like when it's really plain. But I'm going to leave it on a list of newest records. I'll copy and paste this. Oh, let me go back. Edit my post. So I'll paste it in my new one. I'm going to update. Go into my post. And now I have a totally different set of records, and they look totally different. You'll notice, though, that the style is not wonderful. So by default, the list is very plain, and it doesn't include any styling. So whatever styles for various HTML elements are already in your site, that's what will be used if you don't apply anything new. If I take this one and turn that style back on, that automatic suggested styling, if I want to use it, it starts to look a little bit better. But you could also do your own styles from scratch. So rather than using the ones that the plugin will put in automatically for you, you can apply classes or IDs to elements of the list in order to style them in any way that you want. So I'll show you an example of how that works. If instead of using the suggested styles, or including using the suggested styles, but I'm going to add a class called CIOC list. So you notice in my shortcode now I have this list class equals CIOC list. I'll copy and paste that. But I'm going to add something else now. Before all of my content here, I'm going to put some CSS styles. They could also go in a style sheet in your site or anywhere that makes sense. I just want to put, this is the sort of easiest way to do it for the moment. Let's say I want all links that occur within my list of records to be blue. I can now say anything that's CIOC list and a link, an anchor tag, I want the color to be blue. This is some very lazy CSS, but you can see how it works. So as soon as I did that, I was able to change the styling of my list and changing the colors is very simple, but you can get as complicated as you want. So there are names and classes and all kinds of things on this list to allow someone that does have web design skills to go in and make quite a lot of changes to the way this information is presented. I have a question. There's a question about can you have newest records from a specific publication code? Oh, we're getting fancy. So at the moment, I don't have that in. I am looking for reasonable suggestions for things that can be added to some of the lists in order to make them more effective without going overboard. So for example, before this session, we just newly added the ability to do community on a lot of our searches. So let me switch to specific publication, and now I have community. So this is one that I've added, and it may be that a third optional thing that we add to our specific taxonomy or publication is a sort choice. So it returns, these two always return up to 50 records. And what we could do that would be reasonable is to give you a couple of sort choices, so you could pick newly created or updated records come first. You could pick sort by name. There's lots of different ways. We could give you some choices about how that 50 gets chosen so that you could make new ones be more prominent. But I want to keep the list under control. So once it gets very complicated, the full API becomes the way to manage it versus this that we want to keep say, under control with a limited number of settings, in part because this is a tool we want you to share with your community. We want you to feel confident giving this out to organizations that don't know about your work to try and engage them in what you do by letting them include some of your service in their own sites and as their own references. And the nice thing is it will then direct them back to your site to get more information. So it becomes a really good partnership. Because that's the goal of this tool, it needs to not have too many choices. But I'm absolutely willing to negotiate and consider reasonable options, as long as it doesn't get too hard for a lay person to come in and figure out what to do with it. Okay, are there any other questions so far? Okay, so now that I've given you a little taste of what the WordPress plugin does, I'm going to take a break now and show you how to install a plugin. Somewhere on here, I thought I had it up. Here we go. So this is my own actual site that does not have the plugin installed. So I'm going to show you how to install and activate. There are actually two plugins, one for community information and one for volunteer. There's a question here. There's a question about that this is for WordPress. What about people using other tools? So this came up in our last discussion of this tool as well. So for the moment, the code that's been written is for WordPress. The code is open source, and that means that anyone that has a site that runs in PHP can freely go and use that code to bring the same functionality into their own site. I'm absolutely willing to consider creating equivalent plugins for other content management systems like Joomla, or most of them are PHP based. So I could reuse significant amounts of the code to release that, but I would need an absolutely for sure client that wanted it and probably some funding to do so in order to be duplicating the effort. But because this is open source, anybody can go and take that and do something with it. I would hope if someone went and wrote another plugin for another system that they would contribute it back so that we can make it part of our open source project. Hope that answered your question. All right, the advantages of open source. Okay, so I have submitted the plugins to WordPress.org. When, hopefully, fingers crossed, they make it there, it will get a lot easier to manage these plugins, to both install them and keep them up to date. But they're in a really big queue of about 200 waiting to be reviewed. So I can't say exactly when that will happen. When it does, the plugins will actually be searchable right from within the WordPress application. So you would just tell someone who wanted to install it to search CIOC. They would see the plugin, they would click install, and they would be done. And it will get that easy. But for the time being, the only way that we have available for you to get the plugin in is to do a manual install. And you do that by clicking Upload Plugin. And you're going to want to choose a zip file. So I have this already locally on my computer, but if you want to download it from the user manual, there is a link here. And there's also this download the appropriate zip files. If you click on this for each of the community information and the volunteer, whichever ones you want, click on this download the appropriate zip files, save that file to your computer, and then you can do the installation. Here we go. So browse to where the, browse to where the zip file is placed. I'm going to start with the community information one. I'm going to open it, install. That's it. It won't work yet. You need to activate it. So there's this second link here, Activate Plugin. That's what you have to do to actually make it usable. It is now usable. I can see it in my list of plugins from the left-hand side here, plugins. I can see CIOC Community Information Feeds. If I want to get rid of it, including for the moment, in order to upgrade it to a newer version, I'll deactivate it. That will then let me delete it. So deactivate first, then delete. And if I want to do the volunteer one, same process. I'm going to click Add New, browse for that zip file that I can get from the link that's in the documentation, open up that zip file, activate the plugin, and it's immediately available for use. As soon as you've done that, it's as simple as the copy and paste that I've shown you today, and you have CIOC content on your site. That's it. Does anyone have any questions about installing the plugin? When the time comes that this plugin is available from WordPress.org, if you've manually installed the plugin, you should delete it and then install it from WordPress.org. So once you can find it, do a search and find it in the WordPress.org list, delete your manually installed plugin and reinstall it from WordPress.org. By doing that, you'll be able to much more easily get future updates. So I strongly recommend that that be the way that you install it once that option is available to you. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit more about customizing your shortcode. So this little generated bit here. I'm also going to try and do a little demonstration from the volunteer site. So do we have someone with a volunteer application who would like to volunteer me generating a key in their site? If you could do the raise hand. Thanks, Chantal. Okay, I'm going to go to community links now. And I know I have an inactive one in your site, so I'll just activate that one. Okay, so now that key is available for use. And now when I go to the Shortcode Generator, I'm going to get some options that weren't available to me before, because now I have access to the volunteer software. So there's There's actually more options available for the volunteer software because it started out as a tool just for volunteer opportunities, so it's a little bit ahead. There's newest records, which we just saw lists the most recent records. Popular organizations, I described here was organizations that either have brand new opportunities or have opportunities that people are applying for frequently at the moment. I think it's the last 30 or 60 days that it uses to make that choice. Popular categories is based on what people in that area are saying they're interested in terms of categories. So it's based on actual input from your users that are using your site. That's how it chooses what's popular. And then specific organization is one that I hope takes off in the community for volunteer centers, because it will allow your organizations that have posted one or more volunteer opportunities with you to list their own volunteer opportunities on their website. So for example, if you had a group that had 5 or 10 opportunities, rather than having to duplicate those on their own site or just link to your site, they could put in their organization record number and always have a live listing of the current opportunities that they have posted with you. And then those opportunities would link back to your site for someone to do an application and go through that regular process. The category listing is based on the areas of interest. We don't have skills or anything else at the moment, although that all can be considered, but for now it's just areas of interest. And it uses the code, so not the name of the area of interest, but the code of the area of interest, which you can find by going into your setup. So if I go to classification systems, specific areas of interest, this code, this is the thing you need. So if I want to show all opportunities for animals, sounds like a good choice here. Too many things open. Generate a shortcode. So we'll pick my test key. We're going to pick a specific category. It'll be on the main public site. We're going to include all these fields. The code is going to be animals. I'm going to use the built-in styles, and I'm going to use the icons. And now I'm going to copy my link. Copy. I'm going to replace this. Update my shortcode. Let's reload our list. There's only one. It's kind of sad. So this will do up to 30 positions that fall under that category, and it's going to sort newest first. So it's also only going to include active things that would come up if you did a search on the site. Got a question? Oh, Chantel is warning me that they didn't have any. You have one. So we could pick anything, obviously. That was just a sample category, but this is the idea that you can, if you wanted to, for instance, have a listing of refugee-related opportunities on a page about helping Syrian refugees. I know in the Ontario database there is a category specifically for Syrian refugees, and so you could do a feed that always listed current opportunities for that particular category that you can embed into another site that discussed the Syrian refugee crisis and have that as available to people wherever that site may be. Okay, so I'm going to get away from that really handy shortcode generator, which I know people will only use that, but I want people to understand a little bit behind how those shortcodes work and how to tinker with them so that you can have some confidence about how to do it. So the key is to use the documentation, not surprising. So within this documentation, we have a full shortcode reference. It's says everything that's available and gives examples of how to use them. So throughout the document, you're going to see in red examples of shortcode attributes. So an attribute is the part that has the name of the attribute, equals, and then the content in quotation marks. Okay, so this is an attribute of the shortcode. You'll see attributes throughout the documentation. They're really easy to find because they're all color-coded the same way throughout the document. So if you want to switch languages, for example, you could copy and paste this into an existing shortcode you already had on your site and know that that would be how you would switch to French. So I can copy and paste this little shortcode attribute and actually stick that inside an existing shortcode that I might have on the page. I don't have to use the shortcode generator. It will go through and show you all of the components so that you can understand what each piece means and which ones are optional, which ones are mandatory. It gives some tricks specifically around communities because, for instance, there are communities that are repeated in different provinces. And so in order to avoid confusion or picking from the wrong region, one of the tricks we've got is that you can put we call this a bar, this big line there that's above your backslash, and then the province or state afterward, and that will make sure that you're getting the correct Burlington or the correct whatever community it may be when there may be more than one in your database, even if you're not using the other one, that could cause confusion for search results. You can see all the fields that are available at any time, so if that changes over time, you can always come here and check what's available. It gives an example of what all the icons look like, and we have our little secret what to do if it all goes wrong, debug equals on. So if I have a shortcode and it's malfunctioning, I can use debug equals on as a web developer or the owner of the site to get a little hint about what on earth is going wrong. The API often returns some information to you to give you hints if something is not functioning correctly. There's limits to what it can do, but for example, if I go into the setup for my key and I deactivate it, so I potentially have a problem. Where to go? I'm getting no results. Well, why am I getting no results? I want to know what's going on. One of the things I can do to find out is add that debug equals on to the end of my shortcode. That's not something you want to leave on. That's only if you're having a problem or previewing or testing that you want to do that. As soon as I do that, I get access to the link that is being used to call the API. So this is actually a link back into your CIOC database. And what you're about to see is not human-friendly, but we can see here, invalid API token. The API is returning back to you, telling you something bad is going on. If you had an incorrect API key, so if I delete a big chunk of this API key, for example, invalid UUID, invalid request. So it's giving some information to tell you why this is malfunctioning. So that's a little trick that you can use if something is going wrong in a spectacular way. It's not going to help you if you think the wrong content is there. That's a bigger investigation that would have to happen to figure out why that was occurring. But if it's just straight out not working, or you can use the debug to get a link and see a bit about what is actually being returned from the API and look to see if there's any error messages that might be helpful to you. So amazingly, this is a simple tool, and so that's it. That is the whole entirety of how you get CIOC data into your site and how this works. So at this point, it's just Q&A. If anyone has any questions or would like some more information about the WordPress plugin or where it's going, anything like that, then please ask. I can see Andrea has her hand up. Do you want me to unmute you, Andrea? Or is that from before? Okay, see your question. Here we go. Oh, hit by mistake. Okay. All right, well, if no one has any questions, then we're done. We have all of the documentation available. Oh, there's one more question. Here we go. Oh, a couple of questions popping up, I think. My question thing isn't working. Okay, so we've got a few questions. Needing to create a new API key for each organization. So you can reuse the keys, but I do strongly recommend that you give each organization that you want to work with their own key. That allows you to disable it when you don't want it to be active anymore. If you give everybody the same key, then you cannot safely disable it without impacting a lot of people. There's no limit on how many of these that you can create. Obviously, you have to maintain your list, so if you create 500, you're going to regret it. But there's sort of not a big downside to you of creating a reasonable number that you think you can manage. Okay, Andrew would like a little bit of a discussion of the full API, which I will do. And Martha would like to be unmuted, so let me unmute Martha first. If I can find you here. Okay, I'm about to unmute you.
Oh, hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
I just thought my question, it may be really strange and not make any sense, but I'm going to ask you, and I just thought it's too hard to type out. And again, I can talk to you further, but because I'm not that technical, I'm interested but not totally technical. One of the things we often, get requests for specialized lists, meaning, they don't want all of our nonprofits, or they want just a certain number so we can email them out and do different things. But I was just wondering, and again, using the WordPress plugin might be something we definitely do. We haven't done this as an offering to agencies that have WordPress sites and, maybe down the road that aren't using WordPress, just like how you've explained it. But would it make any sense if, say, we, like at Information Berry, for example, or anybody, created our own WordPress site as a means of sending out a link as a nicer way of sending information about those specialized records that they want. And then again, linking it back to our full database. But, instead of sending an email or that maybe doesn't look as slick or whatever, does that make any sense?
So that's actually a really interesting idea. I have some thoughts about how that could work, in that, and this might get a little technical, but that immediately brings into my head the ability to send to the WordPress site a list of records that you want to show up in the list, so that you make your generic page on your WordPress site that is, find the records I want, and that it uses the content of the link in order to generate their list. So that's, that's also something that we can do potentially.
Again, I'm just thinking, for sure, doing it the way that Collingwood used it or you've described makes sense. But and we definitely, it's a way of kind of connecting with your community in a different way than we traditionally have, and because we're calling them for updates and information. But so for sure it's a good thing. But right now we have this issue that if we could send something out in a nicer looking way, again, it raises awareness of the kind of resources we have, And you know, we just create, it's sort of, we create this WordPress site as a tool for us to send out these specialized lists. So anyway, that's the way I was thinking of it.
That's an interesting idea. I think we actually mostly have the tools to do that in CIOC itself, but with that idea in mind, I will think about, so we have our email tool. I will think about a way to have it, instead of copy and paste into the email, just be a link that brings those records up, because that's not a hard problem.
Right. So you're saying, I wasn't thinking of that. I was thinking that we, and if other agencies like Information Bureau, we'd have this kind of WordPress site that we just used for this purpose, and we pull the records we want and put them in and send it in an email to someone in a link, but they open up a nice link that's kind of this website. But you're saying maybe you could do something that's, when you, instead of email list, when you're actually in CIOC, it can be somehow going to a WordPress site and you're sending out? I mean, if I'm understanding.
I don't know. Well, so we should take that offline, but
yeah, that's fine. And again, I'm just thinking out loud too, but we can talk further. You know, there's no urgency with this, but I just wanted to throw it out there.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hope I didn't mute you too quickly. Okay, so there's another question about the full API. So it's definitely worth having a little chat at this moment about the difference between this and the full CIOC API, and what might be available in the near term to deal with if you want your entire CIOC database to be available right in your WordPress site. So we have what we call our Remote Search and Details API in both the community information and the volunteer opportunity software. It has access to all of the types of searches that you do in your CIOC database. So anything you can search in CIOC, you can search through the API. And it works very similarly and calls, in fact, the same code in the database in order to execute searches. And there's then the ability to pull the full record as well, so that once you get your search results, you can bring the content of the record into an external source. And so it basically gives you access to everything except data management related functions from within whatever external source that you want. The challenge of this API is that it does require technical skills at the moment in order to know how to integrate it into your website. So I have a few nibbles from a couple of organizations that would like to see something as easy as this, where you can go onto your page and say, I want a search form here, and this is what I want on my search form, and then it will show the search results from whatever the user enters right in the WordPress site, and then when they click on the search results, not going back to CIOC, it's actually going to pull the records right into the same external site, live out of the database, and you can pick the fields you want to display, and pretty much anything that you could have done right in your CIOC database. So that's, I gathered some really good requirements from a few interested organizations earlier this week, and what I will be doing is putting together an effort estimate probably within the next 2 weeks, and anyone who's interested in participating in an initial go at that full WordPress plugin that would allow you to do all of the different kinds of searches and kind of never leave your site and never have to go back to CIOC except to do data management or feedback or things that require you to submit information into the CIOC database, then I'd love to hear from you. I already have some contacts from organizations that are interested, but it does seem like this is having that one step further is really important. I think it doesn't take away from the value of this, particularly for sharing your resources outside into the wider community and allowing other sites, instead of them copying and pasting contact details they found in your database into a page on their site because they want to list all the food banks on their site, having the ability to give them a key to always have the current list of food banks on their site is a much better way to have quality information out there that's always up to date, and it brings knowledge of your service back into the community. So I think hopefully they still, both will have a role. The role is very different. The purpose of them is very different. And in fact, I can see potentially sites that might use both because this is easy to use. And so having fewer options and really easy ways to configure it without knowing anything about shortcodes or programming or anything complicated is nice. Is there any specific questions that you had, Andrea, about the full API? Obviously, we're not even quite at the point of having specifications yet. Okay, and last question is, will this video be available as long as the recording converts? I can never guarantee, but hopefully if the recording converts successfully, this will be posted within the next week. And then it will also go out in the monthly training newsletter at the beginning of February. So if you don't want to stalk YouTube to wait for it to go up, just wait for that training newsletter, and the link to the video will be available then. There's a question about about whether there is going to be a group for discussion specifically around WordPress. So if you are interested in both this and potentially the bigger WordPress discussion, the mailing list, one of the options is to sign your interest for WordPress. So I would encourage you to sign up for that list, and I will start to try and have regular communications and information going out there, including potentially trying to identify who's interested in a broader discussion. So the first step is please make sure you're signed up for that list. If you have no idea how to get signed up for the mailing list, from my site, let me see. You can always find the link to sign up for the mailing list from my site. If you click on CIOC Software Support, you'll see CIOC Support Notifications mailing list, and make sure you check off CIOC WordPress plugins. If you get other emails from the list, there will be a link at the bottom as well to change your subscription preferences so you can decide which things you're interested in. But that's going to be my primary mode of communicating out thoughts and what's going on with that, and when I put together the initial specs, that's where it's going to go. Okay, so I'm now going to stop the recording. If anyone has any questions or wants to talk about their specific situation, I figure it's better to do that when we're not recording for all. So I'm going to end the recording now, but I will stick around for an additional 10 minutes if anyone has any questions about their specific situation. Thanks.